Welcome to the Queer Witch Project, your resource for all things queer and witchy. I am Damona Beacock, a fabulous, non-binary, neurospicy ordained queerdo with a fascination for all things cycles, symbolism, and patterns.
And I'm Moon Kitty, your queer femme poly kitchen witch and proud geek. Today's topic is internet prophecy, Mercury, and sacred androgyny. Ooh, okay, that's a mouthful and then some.
I'm so excited about this topic.
Oh, I know it's one of your favorites. It's a cool thing we've been discussing a lot offline. So I'm very excited to have it come up as something that we were talking about here with all of you.
Yeah, and that is a really broad topic. We might need to break that down a little bit.
Yes.
Um,
So go ahead.
let's start with like the idea of internet prophecy.
Hmm.
I kind of see the internet as a physical, somewhat, manifestation of the collective consciousness,
Hmm.
which is kind of energetically fed into by everybody who engages with it.
Hmm.
And it also has, I don't know, I think for you, yes, hopefully other people have this experience. So we're not going way out on a limb here, but the internet has a really strange way of telling us things that we need to hear,
Hmm.
sometimes calling us out by like just opening up doom scrolling and then bam, all of a sudden you get a message and you cry because it's
Hmm.
like, wow, I needed to hear those words. So the internet also has a way of making light of um, some of
Hmm.
some current events, especially like political current
Yes.
events. Uh, no matter how alarming things get, I can always count on the internet making a joke about something somewhere. If the internet itself was an entity, an energy unto its own, I would say it was very prophetic.
Hmm. And yeah, I can see what you mean. Here's my take on that is the internet is essentially electrical connections, right? So through
Mm-hmm.
wires, electric connections, our bodies are meat sacks run by electrical energy. We are all this electrical vibration. And again, I fully agree with that idea of the collective unconsciousness as this kind of transference of electrical energy that passes through our
Mm.
brains, through our fingertips into a circular network
Yeah.
that feeds out access to anyone who chooses to plug into it.
Some would call it the Matrix
Kind of, I'm just trying to avoid that particular kind of
reference.
reference, but yeah, basically, in some ways, and
And
we see it with the prophecy. Sometimes we know that, or we sometimes it feels like the computer's always listening. So if you start talking about, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, suddenly you start seeing ads for things. But how
yep.
often have I've just thought about it. I've never said it out loud, but I've thought about, oh, I want to
Mm-hmm.
check into that thing or another thing. Never once said it out loud, and suddenly I'll start getting ads for it. Um,
Yeah.
so again, it's that
It's reading our
collective,
brains.
it's that collective unconsciousness networking that happens. So
Collective
yeah, I fully
consciousness.
believe that the internet prophecy could be a real thing in that sense of getting the messages because deity, whoever you choose to identify, or if you choose to identify with a higher power, energy, whatever it may be, when we're asking for messages and signs, they get presented in a way that makes sense to us. And right
Mm-hmm.
now, in our collective consciousness, the internet is what makes the most sense to a lot of
And
people.
wouldn't a deity use the internet to communicate? Like, I mean, look at what we're
Mhm.
doing. We're making a
Right.
podcast about spiritual stuff and
Exactly.
identity and authenticity and validity and affirmations. Like, yeah, the internet, the spirit works in mysterious ways, and the internet is one of the ways in which I believe it likes to work. So then in my mind, I wonder often what kind of deity, what kind of spiritual entity would be the patron saint of something like the internet.
Hmm.
And immediately for me, because I have a personal relationship with him, I think of Hermes and or Mercury, depending
Hmm.
on, the god of communication, the communicator, the messenger of the gods.
Hmm.
I very much believe and kind of do some Hail Hermes, some Hail Mercuries when the internet prophets start calling me out or sending
Mm-hmm.
me messages, or honestly helps me cope.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just about coping.
Sometimes you are feeling rough and you'll get that message of hope,
Yeah.
or something that just helps you put things in a perspective. And
Yep.
it's really fascinating and really intense when that happens.
So the other thing that happens to me a lot is kind of as a spiritual messenger, a tarot reader,
Mm-hmm.
uh, for my community, people tend to reach out and talk to me about a lot of things, whether
Mm-hmm.
I'm giving them readings or not. And depending on like sometimes what the sky rocks are doing, I will notice a pattern. I'm like, oh, there are like three people all of a sudden talking to me about their life. And even though these are three different separate things going on, they all have a common theme.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sometimes that'll happen, and then I'll be doom scrolling or maybe joy scrolling, dopamine scrolling,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll read something and I go, "Wow, that perfectly like that puts into words what I couldn't say when this friend was telling me about this thing." Now I'm gonna just screenshot it
Mm-hmm.
and send it their way and be like, "Hey, the internet prophets have a message for you. This
Mm-hmm.
made me think of you." In fact, some of the ways that my besties tell me that they love me is by sending me memes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or sending me something that made them think of me, or I'll send them something that made me think of them,
Mm-hmm.
all because of a conversation we were having,
Mm-hmm.
or, because it has a crab in it, or a octopus, or a
Mm-hmm.
unicorn, or a peacock,
Mm-hmm.
what those little things that make you think of people, those
Yes,
little
absolutely.
threads of spirit that you follow that connect
Yes.
to us. Yeah. So I think the internet's a very important tool. Now,
Mm-hmm.
much like the swords sweet suit in tarot, it can have it's double-edged.
Mm-hmm.
It does,
Communication always is.
isn't it though?
That's like every time I think of swords and communication, I always think the pen is mightier than the sword
Mm,
as a saying, because when you think about what you're writing out is that act of communication is writing, and that the words have power, words have meaning, and that's what communication is. It can be nonverbal, it can be
yeah.
physical, but the primary form of communication is words of some form,
Mm-hmm.
written or
Yep.
oral.
Yeah. And so the internet is full of, shadow,
Mm-hmm.
the dark web, the horrible things people will, use it as a tool for. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that the internet is infallible or perfect, or
Oh,
it's
no.
just like very much a reflection of humanity.
It's a tool. Mm-hmm.
It's a tool, and it can be used in a spiritual way, a
Mm-hmm.
spiritual tool. Yeah. Not always. And it can also be used to harm people,
Mm-hmm.
but that's why you have to go into it with discernment and wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And I always love this meme that people were sharing recently about how when we were growing up, our parents wouldn't let us meet strangers off the internet or take rides from strangers, and now we use the internet to hail strangers to get rides.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Changing times. So, so yes, I totally connect the internet to Mercury slash Hermes. I always think of it as like the realm of the air signs,
Mm-hmm.
that energy that you were talking about, that communication. And of course, Hermes leads me to the sacred androgyny.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes,
yeah.
my next question was, so Hermes is this, but how are we queering this? Or how does this relate to internet
Mm-hmm.
prophets also being queer? But there's a very distinct connection in that, in Hermes and
Mm-hmm.
Mercury. Mercury
Yeah. And
equaling the Hermes adaptation
yes,
initially.
Mercury is the Roman name that was given to the idea of the Greek deity of Hermes.
Mm-hmm.
And Hermes has the Hermes Aphrodite connection that um, made up the word for hermaphrodite,
Mm-hmm.
which would be somebody who is essentially would be a word used back then for somebody who was born intersexed.
Mm-hmm.
and or didn't identify with one gender or another.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about the internet as not having a gender, as being accessible to all and none as far as gendering goes. And so I also think of the energy, the spiritual energy of the internet prophets being genderless, gender free,
Mm-hmm.
gender fluid, but definitely like some flavor of non-binary, some sort of sacred androgyny. Just like I think deity spirit is truly at its core meant to be either all things or none.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely not necessarily locked into a binary.
No. There are very few
So
things that are truly locked into a binary. If we think about it, and if you dig deep enough, it's
some
really
people's
interesting.
minds though,
Unfortunately.
yeah. Well, and I mean the brain is actually bisected, which is very interesting, you know.
Hmm. Well,
By
but while it's bisected, things flow back and forth from it
yep.
constantly,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and those creases and stuff make it very difficult to
Mm-hmm.
have a very truly distinct one half to the other where they don't meet because they're always going to have
Well,
a
and we
point where they
need,
cross over.
ideally, we have both sides functioning, you know.
Hmm.
We need that balance. Otherwise, we experience struggle.
I know medically we were talking or talking about the idea of hermaphrodite and the times where it came from. It's not a generally popular term currently used. We'll use
Mm-hmm.
non-binary, we'll use gender fluid, intersex, but
Mm-hmm.
medically for a very long time that was the term for a person with both male and female gender characteristics, talking about that binary. And it was really
Mm-hmm.
interesting with, like I said, it comes from Hermes and Aphrodite, so
Yes.
communication and love combined into one, and it's it's played out so many different ways from like socially. When you thought of hermaphrodites in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, it was the idea of blurred gender. So it was kind
Mm.
of like the idea of the of David Bowie or Annie
Mm-hmm.
Lennox or Boy George and all the beautiful drag kings and queens who had that different kind of sense of presentation of identity.
A lot of folks who were willing to blur those lines in the deep past were seen as sacred.
Hmm.
They were seen as prophets themselves or spiritual messengers or, you know, priests and priestesses in their own rights.
Hmm.
There's a special magic to people who can fully embrace the energy of both the feminine and the masculine.
Hmm.
And I also think when we talk about Hermes and Aphrodite, or if you want to talk about the sky rocks, Mercury and Venus,
Hmm.
um, when we talk about them, I always think of them as the pretty people, the pretty gods.
Hmm.
Hermes, the pretty boy, and Aphrodite's the, you know, goddess of beauty and love.
Hmm.
And I love invoking or embracing that kind of energy and vibe. The other thing about the internet is it makes the arts accessible to so many,
Hmm.
which is, I think, art is another way that the gods and spirit communicates through us, with us, reaches out to us, gets our attention.
Hmm.
I mean,
I
what are memes if not political cartoons
Oh, right.
sometimes?
But I just had a
Uh,
thought that kind of crossed my mind, and this is literally off the top
yeah.
of my head. Is you mentioned again the planets and everything else, and it's very
Mm,
interesting in if we talk about what planets, if we think about the idea of what planets got named, because there's so many
yeah.
gods, how many different gods are there out there in various pantheons? And the nine planets, because I'm still counting Pluto as a planet, though I will die with Pluto being a planet. I don't care if it's a glorified asteroid, it will always be a planet to me.
I could back you on that.
I am a child, I am Gen X, I will die on that Pluto hill.
Hmm.
Um, but
I feel
anyway,
you.
and besides, do you really truly want to piss off the god of death and take away his planet? I
I
mean,
wouldn't.
seriously,
No.
I don't want to do
Yeah.
that spiritually, not going to happen. But
Yay,
any,
Hades.
back to my back to the thought I was having is it's very interesting that the first planet is Mercury and the second planet is Venus. And then you get to Earth and Gaia. So you have the idea of communication and this and oh sorry, let's take that back. The first one is the sun. If you're talking about it from if you're looking at it, so sun is very generally masculine in high
Mm,
energy. And then you have Venus, who is here, but in between them, you have that transition from masculine energy into inter combined energy, into feminine energy, into the creation. So it's to me, this is just a thought that I had in my head. If you're looking at this kind of wavelength and pattern for how things get named,
mm.
and then you go from here's this creation of energy of Earth into the god of war, which humans and the nature of Earth and life is conflict, which could then lead to the idea of war. And you also have Earth in this balance between Venus and Mars. So Mars and Aries both being the various names of
Love and
war. So you've
war.
got this push and pull between love and war with Earth in the center of that
Mm.
conflict. So I don't know
If
if
that
that's a
doesn't
thing or
tell
not,
you,
but
I honestly feel like that's a download on some level because mm, it's like you're pointing, when you're telling me this, you're pointing out a pattern that I would see played out in tarot, but you're seeing it played out in the cosmos or in our
hmm
solar system. And I think that's beautiful because I think all of the symbology interlocks with each other.
hmm
And I think you may be onto something because I think here on Earth, as we're talking about the sacred androgyny,
hmm
that we're meant to experience a mixture. I think
hmm
as humans, we're meant to experience both masculine and feminine energies
hmm
and a fluidity between the two. I don't know that I think we're doing a disservice when we lock people into the idea that they aren't supposed to, cross those lines.
Especially when we talk about gender roles and what the idea of this thing is inherently one or the other when it's really very,
Hmm.
very if it's non-binary if anything, and we've assigned these
Yeah.
various roles to
Mm.
what is masculine or
It's
feminine, which is silly.
almost like it's almost as if we're meant to. I feel like sometimes we set these structures up just so we can, rules are made to be broken
hmm
sometimes. That sort of concept. Like, we make these identities in these boxes just so we can break out of them sometimes. And not everybody's gonna have that journey. But I think enough of us in the queer
hmm
witch kind of category of, already stepping away from what is norm or,
hmm
socially generally acceptable. I don't know. It's not that it's unacceptable, but anyway, yeah, I think that some guidelines are meant to be questioned.
hmm
Some rules are made to be broken. And I think that if I didn't find freedom in my expression, my soul would be missing something.
hmm
I think freedom is very, very much an essential part of being who we are.
And freedom is, but also I think what you just said about expression. And expression
Mm.
could come out in a lot of different ways, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
how you physically choose to present yourself, but also expression comes out in your art,
Mm.
it comes out in your
Yep.
hobbies,
Yeah.
it comes out in the way you
Your
cook,
podcast,
the podcast, all of that. It's all
creative endeavors.
expressions, creativity of who you are. And it's fascinating. And I keep thinking of all of these traditional roles that have shifted over the generations, where it used to be a masculine or a feminine centric thing and then moved to a masculine or vice versa,
Mm-hmm.
and how these ideas of roles shift, and the idea
Uh-huh.
that the role itself is that sacred hermaphrodite, is that sacred in between. And
Mm.
It's
Yeah.
through the cycles and patterns as that it shifts from one to the other and potentially back again.
Yeah. Yeah. And what a magic that is, isn't
Mm-hmm.
it?
Absolutely.
Truly, the liminal space of it all.
Mm-hmm.
It's so powerful. And I really feel like that's the energy in which the internet lives in.
Yes.
And why so many of us are drawn to, if not be making magic or art with it, we're also drawn to be talking about magic and art with it.
Mm-hmm. And I think
So
we're in this point of awakening, which is why we're starting to see so many more
it's a
people who
smaller
are
world.
identifying as witchy or as connection
Yes.
to something other it has been repressed, and this awakening connection through the collective unconsciousness, through the connection and the connectivity of the internet, and
Mm-hmm.
finding this global
Yeah, being able
um
to actually connect to the collective consciousness makes the world a little smaller
mhm,
and help and can promote, you know, seeing the humanity of it all. Being able
mhm,
to know what's actually happening across the
mhm,
world, um, to not
in real
let
time.
right, to not let the oligarchs control the news feed or how we communicate, just to have like the ability to translate and
Mhm,
get info across vast distances in record timing.
mhm,
I don't know if we take enough time as we engage in these, luxuries to really appreciate the magic that's at our fingertips these days.
mhm.
I very often think about how my ancestors, it probably blows a lot of their minds.
Right.
Yeah. You're doing what now with where? Huh? Oh, these kids these days, I
Mhm,
say as I'm well into the fourth decade of life on Earth. But yeah, I always think about how my dad would allow just my dad passed away in 2003.
mhm,
So he didn't have the, smartphones at his fingertips. That wasn't within his lifetime. And he would have been amazed by the technology and the technological advances.
mhm.
I think about that a lot.
That's awesome.
So when I do get called out from the internet profits,
Mhm,
when I am scrolling and get an important message, I will often screenshot or save them, and then they sit in my camera roll randomly and sometimes pop up in memories and stuff.
mhm,
But at one point, I went through and I actually made an album just to put these messages from the internet, these messages that speak to my soul,
mhm.
into its own little photo album, and I called it To Me with Love.
Aw, I love it.
And so if I ever just need like a boost or a pick me up, I can go to this camera roll photo album and read some love notes that I left for myself. But I saved one of my most favorite ones. I may have even
Mhm,
talked about it. I can't even remember if I've talked about it on here recently, but I wanted to read it. It's really
mhm.
just like a
Please.
screenshot of people talking on Tumblr. I'm pretty sure that this is what it is, but like sometimes the best start
Mhm,
stuff is screenshots of a really good conversation. So this one meant a lot to me, and I hope that other people appreciate it. It says, "Your purpose in life is not to love yourself, but to love being yourself. If your goal is to love yourself, then your focus is directed inward towards yourself, and you end up constantly watching yourself from the outside, disconnected, trying to summon the correct feelings towards yourself or fashion yourself into something you can approve of. If your goal is to love being yourself, then your focus is directed outward towards life, on living and making decisions based on what brings you pleasure and fulfillment. Be the subject, not the object. It doesn't matter what you think of yourself. You are experiencing life. Life is not experiencing you."
hmm. I like it.
I love that concept so much.
Mhm,
Just taking away the object of trying to love yourself and instead love this life that you have. Love being yourself. make decisions that produce, pleasure and fulfillment. Like, I love that. Somebody's comment was, "Thank you for this. This is the first post about self-love that hasn't made me want to throw things." And I know there are people out there who struggle with
Hmm.
self-love, the
Oh,
concept
absolutely.
of it. Where our society is definitely based on trying to make you think that there's something wrong with you so that they can sell you something to fix it.
Hmm.
And in a lot of cases, you're fine
Hmm.
without fixing things. You're allowed to be worthy and loved just as you are. And you're allowed to find pleasure and fulfillment and joy in being alive,
Hmm.
even if people have taught you to be critical of yourself.
Right.
So
No,
that's
I
that's
I fully agree. I appreciate,
um
and I needed the reminder. So thank
yeah.
you. Thank you, Internet.
Well, I love how the internet profits work. So, but this
Hmm.
is the internet profit did me a solid on this one, and I want to pass it down and trickle it down. And maybe in some ways, in some small fraction of a way, through the messages and the information we share here, we are somehow participating in
Hmm.
those internet prophecies. Maybe something we've said here is exactly what you needed to hear.
Exactly.
That's why this is so awesome, and why I love this topic,
Hmm.
and why
No,
I find spiritual connection through internet connections.
no, I fully agree. I have found some of the most profound connections that I have made with people have been through the internet first. And because
Mm-hmm.
just of the nature of being able to meet people on other sides of the world and
Mm-hmm.
meet them hopefully later in person, but so
Mm-hmm.
it's just a real thing. Or when life gets so busy and I can't see the people I've met and connected with and loved in
Yeah.
person, I have a ways to still be able to reach out and do that, like this podcast. So
Yay.
I get to
Yep.
reach out and see you every month, and it's phenomenal to me.
Yes, and then we get to hear from people who listen to us from all
Hmm.
over, and that also is a magic in and unto
Yes.
itself. So yeah, I love that very much. I used to have like this social anxiety. I mean, I still do sometimes, but
Hmm.
a
Oh, I still do.
lot better about it. But I used to have like this personal rule that I wouldn't friend somebody on the internet if I hadn't met them in person first, so that I would understand or know their vibe.
Hmm.
And this global shutdown thing kind of happened,
Hmm.
and I laxed on that rule. And I've made friends that I've never met in person, but I talk to them every day.
Hmm.
And I'm really glad. I'm really glad that I don't have that hard and fast rule anymore, that I'm willing to realize that there are humans, no matter where they are on the globe, that, I can have a connection with because we have something in common or share some of our heart space.
Hmm.
So,
It's amazing when we break our own rules,
yeah.
how
Were we
much
just
how
talking
much
about
more
that?
comes into your life when you break the rules that the arbitrary rules that you set for yourself. When you break them, suddenly so much more comes into your life. Now, there's a difference
Mm-hmm.
between rules and boundaries. And I still
Yeah.
think setting healthy boundaries and things is a very important thing to do. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, every time something good is because I had been so heartbroken. I said this, okay, I'm not going to do this ever again. These are my rules. And then I break
Mm-hmm.
them for whatever reason, usually for a person, and it's made all the difference in the world. It's life changing.
Mm.
Is there anything else we missed?
No, I really think that this covered a lot about this topic.
Hmm.
Who knows? We may think about lots of stuff later on, but
Yes. And we'd love to hear what you guys think. What is your favorite internet prophecy that comes
yes.
down to you, or that you've caught and you've seen? Share them, let us know in the comments. All of that stuff. We love to hear. We truly do love to hear from you. We keep saying that every week, but we do
Mm-hmm.
read all the messages
Mm-hmm.
and listen to the feedback and everything that you send us. And for those who's told us in
Yeah.
person that you listen to our podcast, it's you can't understand how much it makes both of our hearts just glow. It truly
Thank
does.
you. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for listening to the Queer Witch Project. And we love hearing from y'all. If you like what you hear, you can always send us a message, give us a like, give us a follow. All of those things, download an episode or two, all of those things help us. And we love helping y'all. So we love when you guys can help us.
If there's a topic you'd like to know more about, or an episode topic that you'd like to suggest, contact us at thequeerwitchproject@gmail.com or find us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram with the handle @queerwitchproject. We upload every other week. And remember, queerness is the key to magic.
Be yourself and love rebelliously.
Bye!
And it also like really makes, I know I have a kitty in my lap.
Yeah, all of a sudden I saw this little orange striped kitty tail go right across the screen, and it just makes me laugh.